Imperfect Thriving, Episode 46, 5 Tips to Stop Overwhelm and Get More Done. I'm Catherine Ely, former attorney turned licensed counselor and coach. Oh yeah, and recovering perfectionist. It wasn't long ago that my self-criticism and fear kept me from having the self-worth, confidence, and courage to make my life my own. Through life lessons learned and by going back to school in my 40s, I am finally enjoying my life in a way I never thought possible, and it is amazing. I want you right here with me. No need for you to go back to school either. I created this podcast to show you the way to the imperfect thriving kind of life, based on what you value, filled with self-worth, confidence, way more joy, and no more regrets. So let's go. Welcome to another episode of Imperfect Thriving. I'm your host, Catherine Ely, and I'm so happy you are here with me today. Today's episode is all about stopping overwhelm in our lives and actually getting more done. Time is our most important asset. It's more important than money and anything else because once we spend it, we can never get it back. It is gone. But like money, we can have something to show for it. We can use it to do amazing things, help others who need it, start and run our own businesses, raise responsible, compassionate human beings. We get to decide, for the most part, how we spend our time. Now, some have the luxury of more free time than others, but on some level, we all have time that is completely ours to choose how to use. It might only be early in the morning or late at night and a few hours on the weekend, but we all have some time. How are you spending your time? Do you rush around from one thing to the next but never seem to accomplish anything? Done that before. Do you feel overwhelmed by all that you have to do and continuously tell yourself, I don't have time to do any of that? Done that before too. Do you consistently fill up your calendar with obligations you said yes to, but really wanted to say no to, or you didn't have the time for it? Yes, yes, and yes, that used to be me. Do you look up at the end of the day and nothing on your to-do list is done? In today's episode, I will share 5 most effective tips on how to get more done. And I have a special bonus that I have created just for you. Along with these 5 tips on how to get more done, I've created the ultimate 2-part time management tool, the daily time tracker and the weekly time finder or weekly calculator. And I'm going to explain in detail how you can use both of these free tools that I'm going to provide for you in the notes of today's podcast. So let's get started with my 5 most effective tips on how to cut down on overwhelm and actually get more done. Number 1, understand where your time is going. The first step in cutting down on overwhelm, getting more done, and reaching your goals is to determine exactly how you're spending your time now. How much time could you be wasting unintentionally? How much time are you spending on social media? Once you know how you're spending your time, you can become more choosy, more intentional, more productive with your time. Now, we will look more at this in a little while when I explain exactly how to use your daily time tracker. So number 1 is understanding exactly where your time is going. Let's move on to number 2. Say no more often. This is a tough one. Billionaire and Berkshire Hathaway CEO Warren Buffett once said, the difference between successful people and really successful people is that really successful people say no to almost everything. Now, we all have different definitions of success. My personal definition of success is consistently taking action toward my values, setting goals in line with my values, and achieving those goals. Since my values and goals look different in all 8 domains of my life, sometimes success can be measured by achievement of a goal. Sometimes there's no proof of success outside of my level of satisfaction with myself and the life I'm living. My definition of success and Warren Buffett's definition of success may be very different, but I 100% agree with his quote. This is not an easy thing to do for us women, I know. We have several limiting beliefs that cause us to say yes when we really want to say no. The most common limiting belief we women tend to have that leads us to say yes is, everyone must like me. If we believe this, then we are always going to say yes because we associate saying yes with people liking us and saying no with people turning away from us. Turning away means they don't like us. So saying yes is the safe thing to do, to not rock the boat, to help everyone continue to like us. But here's what I want you to think about before you answer anyone who is asking for your time. If you're saying yes to other people's projects and agendas, you are saying no to your own. You are spending your time in a way that is not satisfying and is not taking you closer to what you value. Would you go into a store and pick out a sweater you didn't like and spend your money on it? No. So quit saying yes to spending your time on something you don't want to spend your time on. Always saying yes to other people is a surefire way to not ever feel a personal sense of accomplishment, to not have time to put toward your goals, to never have time to exercise or eat well. So stop and think each time someone asks you to lunch, wants you to meet with them, wants you to volunteer. Ask yourself, will I be furthering any of my goals by doing this? Will I be living one of my values if I do this? If you cannot say yes to one of those two questions, then think about saying no to the request. I'm not asking you to never give your time or never volunteer. I love to give my time to important causes, but I will choose a cause that is important to me, that aligns with what I believe in, not a cause that is important to someone else. So my second tip to be your most effective is say no more often. So let's move on to number 3. Number 3 is know the difference between urgent and important. Do you run yourself ragged every day with your busyness? Are you always doing something but never feel like you've accomplished anything? I used to do this. Between errands and laundry, I could fill an entire day and never sit down. But I would get to the end of the day and feel like I had accomplished nothing. I finally figured out that I was not satisfied because I was treating everything that was urgent like it was important, as if it should be at the top of my list of things that I must do that day. But all of those urgent things I was doing were not getting me closer to my values. They were definitely not giving me a sense of accomplishment in myself. I realized that I get to determine how urgent I let something be. I can choose to spend my time on what is important to me and not run around with such a sense of urgency about all of the other little things. I've noticed that successful people have the ability to focus on what makes the biggest difference, the biggest impact in their day, and the biggest difference toward their goals. Now, this requires saying no to a lot of things that might be urgent, but not important. To be successful, to focus on what is important, even if it isn't urgent. The more you can do that, and the more we say no to everything else, the further we will move the difference-making activities and more success we will have. Have you ever read the book, The One Thing, The Surprisingly Simple Truth Behind Extraordinary Results by Gary Keller and Jay Papasan? It's a great book. It was very helpful to me, but the key phrase that they use over and over again is What is the one thing you can do today such that all the other things will become easier or unnecessary? Now, that sounds great, right? It sounds smart. But we women know better. That statement can be very true for many men that have the traditional jobs where they get up in the morning and they still go to the office and then they come home at night. Their one focus can be their work, and they can do the one thing that's going to move their work forward that day. They have sort of the luxury of narrowing everything down to that one thing that would move them ahead that day. Now, women or stay-at-home dads cannot whittle their world down to the one thing that would make everything easier or unnecessary. Now, luckily, we women and stay-at-home dads, we don't have to, right? We can cook breakfast with a baby on our hip while calling out spelling words to another child and braiding the hair of another all at the same time. So even though we probably can't whittle all of our responsibilities and tasks down to the one thing that would make everything else unnecessary or easier, we can sort of cut through the clutter and the noise and learn the difference between what's urgent and what's important. And that leads me to number 4. But before I get to number 4, I just want to ask you, are you beyond over 2020? I mean, I know I am. And so I've been thinking about what can I do with you, with my community, to make sure we put our best foot forward in 2021. Been thinking a lot about this, and this is what I've come up with. I am introducing the Imperfect Thriving Focus Group. Every other week, beginning in January, I'm going to have a Zoom group discussion in which we will focus on ways to make our lives easier, to simplify our lives, to focus on goals, so that we can cut down on the noise and the overwhelm, create better habits, and reach greater heights in 2021. So I want you to be thinking about what being a part of the Imperfect Thriving Focus Group could do for you. And I'm going to have more in the next few weeks on how to sign up for this, but you can always send me an email at Catherine@imperfectthriving.com. And I spell Catherine, Kathryn, at imperfectthriving.com. Shoot me an email if you want me to be sure to save you a spot in our Imperfect Thriving Focus Group. It's going to be big. It's going to be life-changing. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention, it's all free. So just shoot me an email if you want me to put you on the list to make sure you get a spot in our focus group. So moving on to number 4 of the top 5 tips on how to cut down overwhelm and really get things done. And that is prioritize. Even when you start saying no more often, there is still so much to do and so little time to do it in, right? We need to prioritize our goals and disregard anything that's not at the top 3 on our list. Saying no to small things can free your time to say yes to more important things. What domains do you want to invest the most time and energy in? This will narrow down your priorities. What is most important warrants more time and energy spent on it, right? So be clear on your priorities. And you can do this in the version of a morning mindfulness routine or a weekly mindfulness routine. But having really clear priorities every day and every week that move to the top of your list so that you make sure you get those most important things done. Let's move on to number 5. Number 5 is get everything out of your head and down on your calendar. Keeping all that you have to think about and all that you have to do in your head is a recipe for overwhelm and keeps you from being your most productive. Here's what happens when we leave everything swirling around in our heads instead of writing it down. We aren't clear of the number of items on our list. We have no idea how long any of the tasks will take us to complete because we can't even focus on how many tasks there are. So we just tell ourselves, I don't have time to do all that, and we don't do any of it. That's right. We don't mark one thing off of the list, and the more we put off acting, the more overwhelmed we become. Does that sound at all familiar to you? When we get all of the items out of our head and down on paper, we can see all of the items clearly. We can then reasonably estimate how much time each item will take. Then we can arrange them in the order of importance, not urgency. Then we can start taking action. Completely different story. Even if something is not even an actual task, but something you need to spend time thinking about or coming up with a solution for, get it down on paper and assign it a time. Otherwise, the decision will be put off and will cause you more anxiety if you have to make a big decision with a looming deadline over your head. Now that I have shared my top 5 most effective tips to cut down on overwhelm and get more done, I want to walk you through the daily time tracker and the weekly time finder calculator tools. We are going to combine the tips and the tools so you will know exactly how to get more things done. So go ahead and click on the show notes and go print yours out now. 7 of the daily time trackers, 1 for each day of the week, and 1 weekly time finder calculator. And I'll wait right here for you to come back. Okay, so hopefully by now you've printed out your 7 daily time tracker sheets and 1 copy of your weekly time calculator. Now, I want you to take out the first day, no matter what day it is, just take out the next day, write tomorrow's date on it. And I want you to think about what your must-dos are for this day and for the week. So you can line up all the sheets next to each other and think about your whole week. What are your must-dos? These are your non-negotiable items, your work schedule, doctor's appointments for you and for kids, the dentist, school, after-school activities. These are the things that you know ahead of time that you must do. Fill them in with red pen or marker if you have it. Block out enough time to ensure that you complete each of these items. After you do that, I want you to fill in any optional obligations that you have said yes to. I want you to use orange or some other color than what you used for your must-dos. These are things like volunteer, social outings, anything that you said yes to that wasn't a requirement. So fill these in on your calendar in orange or some other color than you used for the must-dos. Be sure to include the time that you need to get ready for these events, to go to and from these events. Now leave the rest of the time blank. And I want you to go back at the end of every day for a week and fill in how you actually use the time in those blank spaces. So go back at the end of the evening and fill in what you did during those times. And I want you to do this for 1 week so that you can assure that you know exactly where your time is going. At the end of the week, go get your weekly time calculator and go get your daily time tracker sheets for each day. And I want you to fill in the time on the weekly time calculator that you spent each day on your yes optional commitments. And I want you to put that daily time in the optional yes column for each day on your weekly time calculator. Then look back at your daily time trackers for each day. And I want you to look at the time that you filled in with the different activities at the end of the day. This was the time that you had open or free and nothing else there. How much time was not assigned to specific items ahead of time? How did you spend this remaining time? Did you intentionally spend it, or did you float from one thing to the next unintentionally? Really think about this for a moment. Was it time well spent? Was it time spent towards something you value? And it can be rest. I mean, rest is something that we value for our own physical and mental well-being. But what I'm asking is, was any of this time sort of wasted? Was it time sucked by social media? Was it time that you really don't feel like you accomplished anything or put toward any of your values? So I want you to look at Monday. How much time do you think you wasted in this time that was not accounted for ahead of time? And I want you to put that in the wasted time column right next to the optional yes column, and do the same thing for each day. How much of that previously undetermined amount of time, the time that wasn't blocked off for anything on your calendar, how much of it do you think you wasted? Put that in the wasted column for each day. Then I want you to add up the optional yes time and the wasted time for each day. And then I want you to take those totals and add all of those up for your weekly total of time for the week. How many hours is it? Now that you've found this time, what will you do with it? So that is tip number 1, and the tool that you need to use to get to the bottom of tip number 1, which is to become clear on exactly where your time is going. You now have found time during the week. What are you going to do with it? Tip number 2, say no more often. Tip number 3, know the difference between urgent and important. Number 4, prioritize. Number 5, get everything out of your head and down on paper. The secret to living a more fulfilling life is spending more of your time moving toward what is important to you. Now you have my 5 most effective tips to get more done and the tools that you need to find more time in your week. That, of course, is the one imperfect action that I hope you will take today. Print your time trackers and your weekly time calculator and start getting more done. Start spending more time on what is important to you. And I will see you right back here next week. But until then, go out and take daily imperfect action toward the life that you want. If you are enjoying this podcast, would you take a moment to go to iTunes and subscribe? It is so easy to do, and it would mean a lot. Imperfect Thriving is a part of the Practice of the Practice podcast network, a network of podcasts seeking to help you thrive imperfectly. To hear other podcasts like the Bomb Mom Podcast, Beta Male Revolution, or Empowered and Unapologetic, go to practiceofthepractice.com/network. This podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information with regard to the subject matter covered. This is given with the understanding that neither the host, Practice of the Practice, or guests are providing legal, mental health, or other professional information. If you need a professional, I encourage you to reach out to one.